Hello everyone, welcome back to Scary Dark Narrations. Today I am here with a chilling collection of the most disturbing true horror stories ever recorded from the darkest corners of the world. In this episode, we will explore 9 bone-chilling tales that will leave even the bravest of hearts trembling. Each story comes directly from the accounts of people who lived through experiences so horrifying that they defy all explanation. These are not simple ghost stories or exaggerated legends, but real testimonies from individuals who face the unthinkable in places where isolation amplifies fear and every shadow seems to move with intent. From travelers who realized they were being watched by more than just the wilderness, to explorers who uncovered secrets hidden deep within abandoned buildings and forgotten forests, to those who learned why locals warn outsiders to never stray from familiar paths after nightfall. Each narrative reveals a terrifying reality that ordinary eyes rarely see. To protect the privacy of those who shared these experiences, some names and locations have been changed, but the core horror of every encounter remains untouched. These stories carry the weight of centuries of secrets, and tonight, you will understand why some places are best left alone. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Scary Dark Narrations for daily true horror content that will haunt your dreams and make you question what is lurking just beyond the light. Hit the notification bell so that you never miss a moment when the darkness calls out to you. They told me the job was simple. Show up at midnight, walk the perimeter every 2 hours, sign the log, and leave by 6 in the morning. They said the only thing I had to worry about was bored teenagers trying to sneak in through the East Wing's broken fence. They said it was straight faces, professional tones, like they'd said it 100 times before. And I believed them because when you're 34 years old, freshly divorced, and your savings account shows $203.17, you don't interrogate blessings. You accept them quietly and hope they don't ask too much in return. The Haverhill State Psychiatric Hospital had been closed since 1994. That's what the intake form said. Facility restructuring. Polite language. Sanitized language. The kind of language people use when the truth makes the room uncomfortable. I didn't know about the 17 patients who vanished in 18 months until later. That first night, all I knew was that the building sat at the end of a half-mile private road outside Harwich, New Hampshire. And the moment my headlights turned onto that road, something inside my chest tightened to slowly, deliberately like a warning I didn't yet understand. I want to be precise about something before I continue. I am not a superstitious man. I've worked construction, demolition, restoration. I've slept in condemned houses and gutted flood-soaked basements where the walls sweated rot. I understand old structures. I understand how wind learns hallways, how pipes remember pressure, how buildings speak in languages people mistake for voices when they're already nervous. I was rational. I still want to believe I am. The hospital emerged from the darkness all at once. 4 stories of red brick, darkened with age, until it looked less like rust and more like something dried and organic. The upper windows were mostly intact, which bothered me more than if they'd been shattered. The ground floor windows were boarded, but the boards had warped, splitting just enough to leave long vertical gaps. From a distance, they looked like eyelids that hadn't fully closed. I parked in the center of the lot and sat there, engine idling for 3 minutes longer than necessary, long enough to notice that the silence out there wasn't empty. It felt occupied. My flashlight was industrial grade, 1,000 lumen. I'd bought it that afternoon because the work order said the building had no active power. When I clicked it on, the beam snapped into existence hard white. Unforgiving, and I told myself that light was authority. The front doors were reinforced glass, padlocked. I had the key. My hands didn't shake when I unlocked it, and that worried me more than if they had. The lobby smelled like wet concrete and something faintly sweet. Not decay exactly, closer to old flowers, left too long in water. The reception desk was still there, curved wood worn smooth by decades of elbows. Behind it, a wall of wooden cubbyholes, 47 of them. I counted without realizing I was counting. Most were empty. A few held folders swollen with moisture, edges curled like soft tissue. I didn't touch them. Some instinct survived logic. I started my first round. Ground floor. 22 minutes. Hallways that narrowed where they shouldn't. Exam rooms with rusted stirrups and cracked sinks. A large room that might have been a dining hall. A smaller room off the east corridor that stopped me cold, a child's shoe placed neatly in the center of the floor. One shoe. Red canvas. Clean enough to feel intentional. I wrote it down. 12:14 a.m. Then I walked away, because standing still felt like consent. Old hospitals make a sound I've never heard anywhere else. Not a creak. Not a groan. A slow, rhythmic exhalation. Like something releasing pressure it's held for years. I heard it near the East Wing nurses' station. There was a medication cart there. Drawers hanging open like ribs. All of them empty except the bottom one. I hesitated before looking. The way you hesitate before checking a bruise you already know is bad. Inside was a clipboard. On it, a patient schedule dated November 3rd, 1993. 47 names. Last names only. Room assignments. Meal times. Medication windows. Perfectly clinical. At the bottom of the last page, written in smaller, careful handwriting, as though the words themselves needed to stay quiet. They are all still here. Please do not look for them after 3 a.m. The building exhaled around me. My flashlight hummed, and then the silence learned my name. I want to tell you I left the clipboard where it was and called my supervisor. I want to tell you, Fear One. What actually happened is that I took a photo of the page, slid the clipboard under my arm, and kept walking because reason is seductive when it wants to survive. Prank. Former employee. Leftover paperwork. I fed myself explanations like pills, swallowed them dry, and climbed the stairwell to the second floor. Ward 3 and Ward 4. General psychiatric units. The ceilings were lower here. The hallways tighter. Doors lined both sides, each with a small wire glass window set at eye level. I made a conscious decision not to look through them. I angled my flashlight down and walked fast. 14 doors in, I stopped. Something was moving inside one of the rooms. Not scraping, not dragging, a slow, deliberate rocking, like something heavy shifting its weight patiently. I stood there longer than I should have before raising the flashlight. The room was empty. Metal bed frame. No mattress. A chair bolted to the wall. That was all, except the restraint straps on the bed-thick canvas loops were swaying gently, as if whatever had been in them had only just stood up. Air currents. Premier told myself. Pressure old canvas. I used the dullest voice I could manage and kept walking. The third floor is where things stopped obeying sequence. I would turn a corner and realize my flashlight was pointed behind me, with no memory of turning. I'd check my watch and find 12 minutes missing, when the walk should have taken 4. The building's breathing sounds synced with my own without permission. Inhale, exhale. Perfectly matched, as if it had practiced. Still here, present tense. Names appeared on the walls in Ward 6. Written in uneven lines, spaced carefully. Howell, Marsh, Cofield, Deering. I stopped after 12 because I'd already counted them once. 47 names. In order, matching the clipboard I was holding. Whoever wrote them wasn't copying. They were remembering. My phone read 2:48 a.m. Please do not look for them after 3 a.m. I should have left. Instead, my flashlight died. No flicker, no warning, just darkness thick, textured, pressing against my eyes, and from somewhere below me, something began to move. Slow, purposeful, like it knew exactly where I was standing. I stood there for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. I know because my phone camera was on. It screened my only light. Timestamp counting every stolen breath. 4 minutes of listening, as whatever moved below ascended not. In a hurry, not uncertain. Time belonged to it here. My flashlight turned on by itself. It was pointed at the stairwell door, and I understood, with a certainty that frightened me more than fear, that this was instruction. Primero followed. Italiano, the lobby was rearranged. Not visibly, but meaningfully. The cubbyholes behind the desk were no longer empty. Each held a personal object, glasses. Hakum, a photograph. 47 items. One for every name. I picked up a photo. The person sat in the bolted chair from Ward 3, staring into the camera with an expression that wasn't fear but patience. The kind that comes after hope dies. My phone said 3:04 a.m. That's when I understood the note wasn't for me. It was for them. Don't look for who you were after 3 a.m. Because after that, you're something else. I called the company at 7 a.m. The woman asked if I'd entered Ward 7. I said there was no Ward 7. She went quiet. The building only has 6 wards. On my log sheet, between 248 and 304 was an entry I hadn't written. Ward 7, all present. All accounted for. I quit. I burned the log. I kept the clipboard. It's in my hall closet now. Sometimes, at night, my apartment breathes with me. Perfectly timed. As though Ward 7 checked me in. I'll be here in the shadows next week. But will you return, knowing what waits in the dark? The elevator shaft was the only reason I almost didn't go. I'd been doing urban exploration long enough to know which fears fade with repetition and which ones only sharpen. Heights stopped bothering me after my 3rd water tower. Tight crawl spaces after my 5th utility tunnel. But an elevator shaft with its car removed unopened. Vertical absence running from basement to roof. Never stopped feeling like a mistake someone was daring me to make. A building can survive without walls. It can survive without windows. But a shaft like that feels like a throat held open, waiting to learn what falls. Bayfield General had been on my list for 3 years. Not because of rumors or urban legends there were none worth mentioning, but because it was aggressively ordinary. The county hospital opened in 1921, shut down in 2003, quietly replaced by something newer and better lit. No fires, no massacres, no headline tragedy. Just a place where people arrived sick and left healed, or didn't leave at all. Those are the buildings that linger. The ones with no mythology to burn away what remains. I drove 7 hours on a Thursday in October. The kind of drive where the radio fades in and out and the highway starts to feel like a single, unbroken thought. By the time I reached Bayfield, the lake air had turned sharp enough to sting the lungs. I parked behind the tree line, killed the engine, and sat for a minute longer than necessary, watching the dark outline of the hospital rise behind the branches. It didn't loom. It waited. I entered through a basement window on the north side at 11:02 p.m. My setup was standard GoPro chest mount, Sony mirrorless on a handheld gimbal, LED panels, red filter headlamp for atmosphere shots. Muscle memory took over. My breathing was even, my hands didn't shake. I checked my fitness tracker out of habit, 64 beats per minute.com. Almost bored. The basement was exactly what you'd expect. Boiler room, storage cages. A records room stripped of anything worth selling. Filing cabinets stood with their drawers hanging open, like mouths that had tried to speak and given up. What didn't belong was the smell. Not rot. Not mold. Something clean. Antiseptic. Faint, like a memory of disinfectant that had refused to fade. I mentioned it on camera, labeled it residual chemical use, and moved on because labeling things is how you keep them from naming you first. The stairwell ceiling bloomed with old water damage, brown stains spreading like maps of storms that had already passed. The steps were solid. When I reached the ground floor corridor and paused to let my eyes adjust, I heard Ita sound from above, steady and patient. A slow rhythm. I thought of birds first, something nesting in the upper floors. I noted it on camera and kept moving, because hesitation is how you start inventing meanings. The ground floor was intake and triage, 6 exam rooms down the main corridor. All empty, all stripped to a center. At the end sat the nursing station, a circular desk designed for visibility, the kind that assumes someone is always watching. The drawers had been pulled out long ago. The contents were gone. What remained were 4 photographs taped to the inside of the desks, central support, facing inward. You wouldn't see them unless you stepped inside the circle. They were staff photos. A retirement party, maybe. 4 people in scrubs and paper hats. A sheet cake on a folding table. Names written beneath in marker. Dr. Aboud, Nurse Tran, Nurse Calloway, Orderly Marsh. Dated 2001. I photographed them without really looking at their faces. That detail of my refusal to look would come back later and make sense, in a way I wish it never had. The rhythmic sound continued overhead. I took the stairs to the 2nd floor. The door at the top was ajar, open about 4 inches, just enough to spill darkness into the stairwell. For a moment, in that narrow gap, there was the unmistakable sense of being regarded. Not movement, not threat, just attention. When I pushed the door fully open and swept my light down the corridor, there was nothing there. I told myself it had been the door. That's what you do. You give fear a shape small enough to carry, and then, very softly, very clearly, The silence learned my name. The second floor was surgical. I knew it from the layout operating theaters, recovery rooms, scrub sinks, still gleaming like they'd been polished that morning. My flashlight bounced off chrome and came back to clean. The operating table stood beneath the lights, arms extended as if paused mid-procedure. I ran my hand across the surface. No dust, no grit, clean in a way that felt recent. Stop. Think. Custodial visits, property management walkthroughs, other explorers playing games. I stacked these explanations quickly, like boards over a hole, and kept moving. Recovery room 1 held 6 beds. All 6 side rails were up. That isn't accidental. You have to lift and lock each one. Recovery room 2. Same. 3. 18 beds total. All prepared as if for patients who simply hadn't arrived yet. I noted it on camera. My voice stayed level. I was proud of that, too. The sound above me was louder now. No longer something I could pretend was an animal. I stood still in the corridor and listened. Wheels on linoleum. A hospital bed being rolled back and forth. Controlled. Deliberate. Directly overhead, my heart rate climbed to 98. The third floor was pediatrics. I'd planned to avoid it. There are places decay shouldn't touch, and children's wards are one of them. But the sound was coming from there, and curiosity has a way of voting before reason finishes speaking. My feet were already on the stairs. The corridor had once been painted in yellows and blues. The colors clung to the baseboards and the ceiling edges where moisture hadn't reached. The rooms were smaller. The sinks lower. Most of the beds were gone. The rolling sound stopped as I reached the top, replaced by a silence that felt occupied. At the end of the hall sat the pediatric nursing station, smaller than the one below. Half circle. Open-backed. On the desk, perfectly centered, lay a patient intake chart. Crisp and new. The date at the top was the date of my visit. I photographed it without touching it. The patient name was blank. The diagnosis field read, "Still here." I left the building at 12:31 a.m. I didn't explore the 4th floor. I didn't look for the source of the sound. I sat in my car and reviewed my footage and felt something inside me close when I realized the GoPro chest mount had captured nothing above the basement. 90 minutes of footage ending the moment I stepped onto the ground floor. And then, at the end of the file, 11 seconds, I didn't remember recording. The pediatric nursing station, shot from slightly below eye level. The intake chart in frame, and at the bottom, 2 small hands resting on the desk, patient and still, as if they'd been waiting for me to notice. I uploaded the footage. Not. The 11 seconds that stayed offline, but everything else, week in a week messages started coming in from former staff and family members of patients. They fell into 2 categories. I recognized that room. "And, who is that in the background?" I went back through the footage. Recovery room 2. At the 47-minute mark, the surgical corridor at 1:22, the 2nd floor stairwell at 2:08. In each, at the edge of the light, there was a shape. Not threatening. Just present, standing with the practiced stillness of staff who know how to exist without being noticed. I pulled up the photos from the nursing station and finally looked at the faces. Nurse Calloway was looking off to the side, her attention fixed on someone just outside the frame. In my footage, The shape in recovery room 2 faced the same direction. Same angle, same quiet attention. Records told me Nerstrand had died in 2004, found in the parking lot after re-entering the building through a basement window on a Tuesday night. Dr. Aboot had spent his final years asking to return to the ward. Orderly Marsh left no record beyond the photograph, as if he'd stepped out of documentation entirely. I enlarged the intake chart photo and adjusted the levels. In faint pencil, barely visible. The admitting physician field wasn't blank. It read, self-admitted. Date of entry. Ongoing. Reason. Unfinished. Some nights, when I check my fitness tracker before bed, my resting heart rate sits at 47 beats per minute. And every time it does, I remember the beds, the names. The second the clock hesitated before moving on. I'll be here in the shadows next week. But will you return, knowing what waits in the dark? I worked at Collingwood Memorial Hospital for 31 years. I want you to hold on to that number, 31, because numbers like that don't just mark time, they shape Italiano. They teach places how to recognize you. I started there in 1971, fresh out of training. Hands steady but heart too loud in my ears. Assigned to the second ward where the windows faced the river and the nights never truly went quiet. By 1979 I was charge nurse, and for the last 14 years of my career I ran the night shift. 12 staff under me. An average census of 62 patients who trusted us with their pain, their fear, their last conversations. I didn't just know the hospital's layout. I knew its habits. I knew which floorboard outside room 204 sighed when you stepped on it. I knew the East Corridor radiators always clicked to life 10 minutes before the West Wing. I knew the elevator paused, always, without fail, between the 3rd and 4th floors. A hesitation so consistent we timed it with our watches during slow nights. And I knew the clock above the nurse's station, the one maintenance never quite fixed, whose second hand always stalled at the 47-second mark before jerking forward again. We joked about it. Everything that lasts long enough becomes a joke. The hospital closed in 2007. I had already retired. 4 years earlier, pushed gently but firmly out, by knees that no longer forgave 12-hour nights, and a husband who reminded me we had given enough. When the closer was announced, I expected sadness. What I felt instead was guilt, the specific, needling guilt of having ended a shift without handing over properly, of leaving patients asleep and never coming back to check their vitals. I drove past the building often after that. The parking lot empty, the signage removed. Collingwood Memorial sitting on Meridian Avenue. Brick facade unchanged. Its 2 wings stretching outward like arms frozen mid-reach. I never stopped the car. I told myself there was nothing to see. My husband died in 2019. Grief doesn't arrive the way people describe it. It settles. It rearranges your routines until you don't recognize the shape of your days. In 2023, at 77 years old, with my house too quiet and my nights too long, I heard through an old nurses group that the hospital was scheduled for a demolition the following spring. 8 months left, maybe less. I contacted the property management company, explained I had worked there 31 years, said the word closer had unfinished edges for me. They gave me a 2-hour visitor pass for a Tuesday afternoon in July. The property manager was a young woman named Dana, clipboard tucked against her chest, smile practiced but kind. She had me sign a release form. No liability. No photos. No posting. And handed me a printed floor plan, as if I could ever forget where anything was. I folded it without looking and slipped it into my coat pocket. Then aside said he'd wait in the lobby. I said that was fine. Some things you do alone, even when help is offered. The levee was smaller than memory had promised. The admitting desk still stood there, stripped bare. No computers, no phones. No bowl of mints Nancy Hebert had kept there for 16 years because she said hospitals should offer one small kindness up front. The overhead lights were gone. Sunlight spilled through the front doors and died 15 feet in, swallowed by the corridors beyond. I switched on my flashlight sooner than I expected to. The darkness wasn't empty. It felt stored. It felt stored. I walked toward Ward 2, and the smell met me halfway down the hall. Industrial cleaner and old paper, sharp and unmistakable. From the supply room off the second ward, exactly as it had always been. Time hadn't softened it. Time hadn't touched it at all. It was as if the building had been holding its breath, waiting for me to notice it, remembered. I told myself this was nostalgia. That memory fills in gaps aggressively when given the chance. But the quiet pressed back. My footsteps sounded wrong, too loud and yet absorbed, like the walls were listening instead of echoing. The flashlight beam skimmed over closed doors, peeling paint, dust thick enough to show every disturbance. When I reached the entrance to Ward 2, I paused. You'd think I'd feel relief. What I felt was recognition, and something underneath it. Expectation. The clock above the nurse's station was still there. No hands moved, of course, but the second hand rested just shy of the 47 mark. As if it had stopped mid. I laughed, softly, at myself. Old habits die hard. I told the empty ward hello, and somewhere deep in the building, something shifted, as if the silence had learned my name. I started with the patient rooms, because beginnings matter. The beds were gone, the monitors removed, but the call-light panels remained above each doorway. Yellowed plastic and wired bulbs we'd installed in the late 70s. They should have been dead. I walked past them slowly, filling the emptiness with people. Room 201. Mr. Hartley, who complained about everything and thanked you anyway. Room 203. The Reyes girl, 12 years old, singing under her breath. Room 207. The man with no family, whose hand I held for 40 minutes because no one deserves to leave alone. Room 211 stopped me. It looked no different from the others. Bare, dusty, afternoon light filtering through the window, except for the call light indicator. It wasn't lit. It wasn't dark. It glowed faintly blue, cold and steady. A color that shouldn't have existed in a building without power. The smell of cleaner and old paper was strongest there, thick enough to taste. I stood in the doorway longer than I meant to, my flashlight beam trembling slightly despite my grip. I told myself it was reflection, residue, imagination, but imagination doesn't hum. I turned toward the nurse's station. The counter remained, scarred with decades of use. The medication room door stood closed. I still had my old hospital key on my ring. I don't know why I'd kept it all these years, only that some objects refused to be downgraded to souvenirs. The key slid into the lock, easily. It turned. The door opened. The shelves inside were full. Not of medication, of belongings. A gold-banded watch, a child's crayon drawing laminated carefully, a small perfume bottle, almost empty, a hospital bracelet, lying face down. These were the things patients left behind when they didn't go home. I had cataloged hundreds of them over my career, logging them quietly, respectfully, waiting for families who sometimes never came. Seeing them arranged here felt less like discovery and more like accusation. I picked up the bracelet. The room number on the back read 211. When I turned it over and saw the name, my flashlight flickered twice, sharp, mechanical, then steadied. The name belonged to the man I'd sat with in 1987, 53 years old, no visitors, no one too cool. I hadn't thought of him in decades. I couldn't have recalled his name if pressed. Yet, there it was, ink faded but legible, waiting. I put the bracelet back exactly where it had been. From the corridor came the sound I knew better than my own breathing. The coal light buzz, 2 tones, insistent, active. From room 211. I didn't move at first. Training takes over before fear. Count seconds. Assess. The buzzing lasted 47 seconds. Then it stopped. Silence folded back in on itself, thicker than before. I left the ward. I told myself I was done, but the corridors seemed longer, bending subtly. Doors I didn't remember appearing where there shouldn't have been any. I passed the elevator and noticed its indicator needle hovering between floors, just as it always had, even now. The clock above the station still pointed just shy of 47. My watch said time was passing normally. The building disagreed. When I reached the lobby, Dana was gone. Her clipboard lay on the desk, lanyard coiled beside it. I called her name, no answer. I phoned the management office. A woman told me Dana had logged the building as empty an hour earlier. No visitor present. My pass said otherwise. I stood there, present and documented, feeling the edges of myself blur, as if the building had decided which parts of me counted. I went home, carrying the quiet with me. In my coat pocket, along with the folded floor plan, was a hospital bracelet, not the one from the shelf. This one bore my name, my maiden name, my date of birth, my badge number. The room assignment read Ward 2, written in my own careful handwriting. I slept poorly that night. The clock by my bed hesitated at 47 seconds before moving on. I sought rational explanations. I visited my doctor. Cognitive tests came back normal. Grief, they said, can surface memory in strange ways. Dissociation can blur action and recall. These explanations almost fit. Almost. What doesn't fit is the way my daughter looked at the bracelet. When she visited, she read the name, smiled sadly, told me it was probably something I'd kept without remembering. Then she turned it over. Her face changed. She flipped it back down and didn't tell me the room number. She calls me every day now. Every single day. As if checking I haven't drifted somewhere she can't follow. I went back through my old journals. Night shift notes. Incident reports. In the margins of a 1992 entry, I found a reference to 47 seconds, the average response time on Ward 2. The interval between collide activation and nurse arrival we prided ourselves on. 47 seconds. Long enough for panic to bloom. Short enough to save someone who was still breathing. That's when it settled into place. 47 seconds isn't just a number on a clock. It's how long it takes a heart to stop after the last breath if no one comes. It's how long the hospital learned to wait. I understand now why the belongings were there, why the call lights still work, why the building didn't register me as present to Dana. I never really left, none of us did. 31 years of nights taught the place, our rhythms, our handwriting, our patience. And now, as demolition approaches, it's calling us back to finish what was paused. Some nights I wake convinced I hear the buzz. 2 tones. Distant but clear. I don't answer. Not yet, but the clock always hesitates at 47 seconds before moving on, as if reminding me there's still time to respond. I'll be here in the shadows next week, but will you return, knowing what waits in the dark? There are 3 rules on every documentary shoot I produce. Rule 1. Everyone carries a radio. Fully charged, check twice. Rule 2. Everyone memorizes the exits before we roll a single frame. Rule 3. If anyone leaves the group, the entire group stops until that person is found. These rules are in the superstition. They're muscle memory, built from 11 years of filming places that were never meant to be revisited. Decommissioned power plants, flooded schools, chemical facilities that still hummed with danger long after the locks were cut. I have produced 41 documentary shorts without a single serious incident. I have never broken my own rules, not once. Not until Ashmore. Ashmore Estates Hospital sat in the flat farmland of Elmore County, Illinois, where the land stretches so wide it feels like the sky has nowhere to hide. The hospital operated from 1916 to 1987, a rural catch-all institution that absorbed whatever the county didn't know how to handle psychiatric patients, long-term care cases, people whose families stopped answering letters. At its peak in the 1950s, it housed over 700 patients. By the time it closed, fewer than 30 remained. Funding was cut. Those 30 were transferred out. According to every public record I could obtain, no follow-up was ever documented. The system stopped paying attention, and the paperwork ended where interested. That was the story I was there to tell. Institutional abandonment. What happens when a place outlives the people responsible for closing it properly. I had been developing the pitch for 2 years. I knew the angle. I knew the tone. I knew exactly what kind of quiet horror audiences expected, and I intended to deliver it honestly. We arrived in September, late afternoon, the light already thinning. My crew was small and experienced. Donnie on camera, who'd been with me on 8 previous projects. Marcus Hamelin sound, steady and meticulous. And Theo, a production assistant, 22, on his 3rd professional shoot, new, but eager. Smart. Alert. We had permits for a sunset to midnight window. Insurance paperwork signed. Site waivers cleared. Radios tested. Flashlights. A portable generator humming patiently in the truck. Everything was correct. The building itself was 3 stories of late Italianate, revival-arched windows, decorative corbelling, a front entrance that still remembered what it meant to matter. The kind of structure that doesn't collapse into ruin so much as stand there, offended by time. I walked the perimeter alone first, as Primet Alwa, Structural integrity looked stable enough for careful movement. The east wing showed roof deterioration. We marked it off. No east wing. Simple. On the north side, I noticed something that didn't fit. Several ground floor windows had been cleaned. Not weather cleaned. Not the accidental clarity of rain and wind. This was deliberate. Circular wipe marks. Recent I photographed them and noted it in my journal. Possible recent site access by owner or management. A mundane explanation. A mundane note. Note. Inside, the smell was wrong. Not the rot I expected. Not the aggressive mold explorers online had warned about. This was stillness. Stale, but interrupted. Like a room that gets opened and closed, just often enough to remember air. Marcus noticed it too. We exchanged a glance and said nothing. Professionals don't narrate unease, unless it serves the story. We set up in the main lobby. The original admissions desk still stood, wood-worn smooth by decades of hands. I delivered my opening to camera, the speech I knew by heart. 41 Documentaries teaches you how to sound like you're discovering something for the first time. I looked straight into the lens and said, "This is Ashmore Estates. What was lost here was never recovered. What remained here was never counted." One take. Clean. Donnie gave me a thumbs up, and directly above us, unmistakable in the quiet, a door closed. Not a slam. Not a collapse. A door latch. Engaging. Precise. Intentional. The silence, after it felt educated. Like it had learned our names. We all heard it. There was no denial to negotiate. Marcus's recorder caught it cleanly, the mechanical click of metal meeting metal. Donnie tilted the camera upward on instinct, framing nothing but cracked plaster and darkness. Theo went pale in a way that had nothing to do with lighting. I keyed my radio and said, evenly, because calm is contagious, "Second floor check. Let's move." We were still professionals, still in control. The second floor was patient wards, long corridors, identical rooms. 16 per side. We moved systematically, filming as we went. The remnants were expected bed frames, collapsed mattresses, rusted for stands. What wasn't expected were the charts, dozens of them, not filed, not stacked, scattered across floors and tables, open to specific pages. The dust around them was disturbed in patterns that told a simple story. Someone had been reading recently. Carefully. I picked one up from room 214. The patient name was redacted, blacked out with institutional finality. The diagnosis and physician notes remained. The last entry was dated March 14th, 1987. 4 months before closure. Did not read. Patient continues to report that rooms on the 3rd floor are occupied. Patient insists on hearing movement above. Recommend continued sedation and monitoring. I read it aloud to camera. Contextualized it the way documentaries do. Institutional neglect. Dismissed testimony. I kept my voice level. Above me, footsteps crossed the 3rd floor corridor. Slowly, one end to the other. Each step deliberate. That was when the rhythm changed. The 3rd floor is where I broke my own rules, though it took me time to understand that. I didn't see Theo leave. One moment, he was beside us. The next, He wasn't. His radio didn't respond. His name echoed back wrong, bent by the building. We moved upstairs. The third floor had been long-term care. The walls were different, covered in writing, not graffiti. Records, names, dates. Notes scratched carefully, neatly, as if accuracy mattered. Thomas, 1979. Still waiting. Room 301. Someone walks here at night. Please check. I was here. I was real. Dozens of years layered on plaster. A history that never made it into a file. We found Theo at the end of the corridor, standing in front of the last room. Still. Two. When it turned, his face held the expression of someone who had learned something irreversible. There's someone in that room, he said. We looked. The room was empty. We left early 2 hours before a permit expired. I logged it as a crew welfare decision. A neat explanation, a professional lie, I believed at the time. The footage disagreed. I reviewed it the next morning in my edit suite. Coffee cooling beside me. Daylight pressing harmlessly through the windows. 4 hours of raw material. At the 47-minute, 13-second mark, in the doorway of room 301, a figure stood, watching Theo walk past. Institutional clothing. Stillness. Waiting. 6 seconds. I enhanced the frames. Stabilized. Zoomed. The face was unmistakable. Late 40s. Female. The patient from room 214's chart. Transferred from the 3rd floor, from room 301. The one reporting movement above. The one everyone sedated. She was still there. Still checking. Still right. Theo confirmed it when I sent him the clip. He told me he had followed someone into that room, that he understood. Suddenly, he was standing inside a memory that hadn't ended. A loop the building never shut down. I never released the documentary. The footage sits untouched, and sometimes, late I think about those 6 seconds, about the second hand on the time stump hesitating, about how long it takes for something to stop once it realizes it's been abandoned. I'll be here in the shadows next week, but will you return, knowing what waits in the dark? The first sound I remember isn't my sister's voice. It's the silence. Afterward, Howard lingered on the phone line like it was listening to us breathe. Emma had gone quiet mid-sentence, the way people do when they're thinking faster than their mouths can keep up. And I waited, smiling, expecting her to jump back in with another excited theory. Instead, the silence stretched. Then she laughed softly and said, "If I'm right, this place is bigger on the inside." I asked her what she meant, and she changed the subject. We said goodnight. I slept badly. That was the last normal conversation we ever had. Emma disappeared in the Kelamine in October of 2019. The facts are tidy, almost comforting in their orderliness. She signed in at 9 a.m., she carried approved equipment, she followed a mapped route. She didn't sign out. 48 hours later, search teams found her camera, her notebook, her water bottle set down carefully at a junction known as Shaft 4. No blood, no torn clothing, no sign she'd fallen or been dragged, just absence, arranged neatly, like the end of a sentence that never got its punctuation. Everyone else learned to live with that kind of ending. I couldn't. I replayed our last call until I could hear the static beneath her voice, the tiny hesitation before she laughed. I remembered the way she'd whispered one detail as if the mine itself might overhear us. The clock mounted at the ranger station, the one she'd glanced at while signing in. The second hand always stutters, she'd said. At 47 seconds. Every minute. It's probably nothing. She laughed again, but the laugh sounded forced. That detail stayed with me. Useless and stubborn. Like a splinter I couldn't work free. I buried myself in her work. Acoustic propagation. Echo delay. The math of how sound should behave in confined spaces. The Keller mine was supposed to be simple old coal shafts. Collapsed spurs. Nothing exotic. But Emma's notes hinted at something else. Delays where there shouldn't be delays. Returns that came back altered, as if the sound had aged while it traveled. I filed records, requests, chased footnotes, read incident logs until my eyes burned. That's when I found the 1987 report. Miners hearing their own voices minutes later. Not seconds. Minutes. No structural explanation. Shaft 4 restricted. Study recommended. Study never done. By March of 2024, my grief had calcified into purpose. I signed in at the ranger station with Emma's name echoing in my head and my own writ neatly below it. Las 9:17 Alto M. The ranger kun watched me load my pack and ask what I was studying. Primera. Say the sound. He hesitated, then told me 2 others had tried the same thing that year. Both came back shaken. Both recommended sealing the mine. Nothing had changed. He handed me a radio and told me to check in every hour. His voice was calm, but his eyes followed me longer than necessary. Inside, the mine felt wrong immediately. Not dangerous, familiar. The darkness wasn't empty. It pressed back, absorbing the beam of my headlamp, as if light had weight here. I reached shaft for just after 10. Emma's things were still there, dusted but untouched, the camera angled toward a wall she'd been mapping. I set up my recorder and clapped once. The echo came back clean. Then it came back again, 2 seconds late. Then again at 5. Then 12. The same sound, layered, stepping on its own tail. Underneath it all, I heard a whisper. My voice. Calm, curious. Saying a name I hadn't spoken aloud. Emma, where are you? I froze with the headphones tight against my skull, listening to my own question repeat itself from somewhere deeper than the tunnel should allow. When the next echo arrived, it wasn't mine. It was hers. Not a memory. Not a recording. Alive in the way only a present voice can be. Carrying breath and intention and the faintest tremor of excitement. She was quoting our last call, word for word, including the laugh that followed. I tore the headphones off. The mine was silent. When I put them back on, she was still talking, as if she'd never paused. I shouted her name. The sound didn't come back right away. It returned in pieces 30 seconds later, then a minute, then long reach echo warped, stretched thin, colliding with others. Conversations bled together. A man arguing about safety protocols. A woman reading from a report. June's voice, casual and uneasy. Temine wasenti, reflecting sound. It was hoarding it. I moved forward because standing still felt worse. The tunnel bent where my map said it shouldn't. Side chambers opened and closed, like thoughts I almost remembered. The echoes thickened, a constant low murmur that made it hard to tell which thoughts were mine. Emma's voice grew clearer, guiding me by accident or design. She narrated her notes aloud, time-stamped, methodical. 9:47, she said at one point, and something in me tightened. The way she said it, careful, as if she were counting down to something she didn't want to reach. I followed her into a chamber that stole my breath. It was enormous. The ceiling swallowed by darkness. The walls were covered in maps, hundreds of them each. One a different version of the Keller mine. Tunnels contradicted each other. Depths shifted. Routes looped back on themselves. In the center sat a desk and a recorder. Emma's recorder. The counter glowed with a number 2, large to feel real. Years of continuous recording. Her voice played immediately. Confused at first. Then calm. Then resigned. She talked about the mind changing, not collapsing, not shifting, but rewriting itself. About sound as a tool, a pen. Every word creating space. Every echo carving a chamber. It listens, she said softly. It remembers better than we do. The recording ended. The chamber didn't. I heard her behind me, live in close, telling me I shouldn't have come. She looked right. Too right, she explained with a gentleness that hurt more than fear. The mind reflects you until the reflection is clearer than the original. Then it keeps the reflection. She gestured to the maps. Everyone who'd vanished was still here, speaking, expanding the place one sentence at a time. The mind was growing toward the surface. I tried to run. The tunnels folded. My breath came back to me before I could take the next one. I burst into the same chamber again. The maps, unchanged. Emma waiting. She told me time down here didn't move forward. It propagated. Like sound. I checked my watch. 9:17 a.m. I stopped running. I listened. The echoes mapped the place better than my eyes ever could. When I followed them, I found a slope that felt right. Light. Appeared real light. I emerged into the parking lot. Heart hammering. The air to clean to trust. Chun stared at me like I was a stranger. The log showed no entry. The date was wrong by 2 years. The world had continued without me. My life existed only as a brief article and a memorial notice. I learned to survive in the margins, to read between overheard conversations, and everywhere I heard it. Voices repeating, buildings murmuring things no one had said yet. Near Harlan County, the reports started. Acoustic anomalies. The echo map reaching up. I'm writing this because the mind doesn't need my permission anymore. The clock at the station still hesitates at 47 seconds. I finally understand why. That's how long it takes for a heart to stop after the last breath. That's the pause the mind measures before it decides what to keep. If you ever hear your own voice ahead of your thoughts, don't follow it. Don't answer. It's not calling you. It's charting you. The recorder is always running. And when it finishes, I'll be waiting in storage for B, listening to you arrive, already knowing what you're about to say. I measure things for a living. Weight. Stress. How much a structure can tolerate before it gives up and falls inward on itself. Old buildings are honest, that why they confess their limits if you know where to listen. When the county hired me to assess the Thornton mine site in eastern Tennessee, I expected the usual confessions. Rot disguised as nostalgia, rust masquerading as character, gravity quietly tallying its debt. 3 days. A report, a recommendation. That was the promise. I didn't know the site would measure me back. The drive out was dull enough to lull me into routine. Bare trees, stitched against a gray November sky. The radio cycling through static and talk like it couldn't decide what century it belonged to. I arrived the compound sat in a shallow bowl of land. Surface buildings arranged with the tired symmetry of a place that once ran on whistles and clocks. Administration, storage, garage, all of it abandoned since 1983, the year the mine closed without explanation. I met Bill at the gate. Local contractor, thick hands, careful eyes. He gave me a hard hat and a folder of blueprints, yellowed at the edges, the ink faint where decades had tried to erase intention. Most of it's sound, he said as we walked, but there's one structure. He led me away from the main cluster to a small building near the tree. It barely deserved to be called a building. A shed, really. Tin roof, rusted into lace, unpainted boards, gone gray and soft with age. Shift supervisor station, Bill said. Radio contact, logs, schedules, and the problem. Primera. Asked. He didn't answer with words. He showed me messages on his phone. 3 contractors. 3 refusals. Each cited the same thing. A central beam that was unsafe. Not damaged. Not failing. Wrong. Bill handed me the keys. I need documentation, he said. If it's unsalvageable, we'll level it. I've got to run supplies 3 hours, you'll be alone. Alone didn't worry me. Buildings tell the truth when no one's watching. The door stuck before it opened. Inside was a single room, 20 feet square, dust layered like snowfall. A desk with a dead radio bolted to it. Filing cabinets, a chalkboard with a shift schedule frozen in October 1983. And in the center, a support beam running floor to ceiling, 12 inches square. Dark timber, oak, maybe it held the ridge like a spine. I walked it, checking joints, tapping for rot. Nothing. The beam was perfect. Too perfect. When I put my palm to it, the cold surprised me. Then the movement, a slow, steady pulse under my skin, like a heartbeat traveling through wood. I pulled my hand away and laughed once too loud. Vibration, I told myself. Distant traffic. Wind. Anything that obeyed physics. I pressed my palm back. The pulse met me. 72 beats a minute. My resting heart rate. I stepped back. Breath shallow, and the room seemed to expand a fraction, as if it had been waiting for me to notice. I measured the beam. 12 inches square, 10 feet 7 inches tall. Normal. But when I looked without instruments, it felt larger, thicker, occupying more space than it should. He took photos on the screen. Everything was sharp except the beam, its edges blurred, as if the camera refused to finish drawing it. The chalkboard drew me in. 7 names, under underground crew. One space rubbed clean, chalk dust ghosting a blank where a name should be. I checked the blueprints. The supervisor station didn't require an interior support. No beam indicated. The roof load was carried by exterior walls and joists. The beam shouldn't exist. In a filing cabinet, I found a single page dated October 19th, 1983. Emergency installation. Beam salvaged from Shaft 6, Level 3. Load rating, indefinite. That was when the silence learned my name. It wasn't a sound, it was a pressure. The room holding its breath. I felt watched by angles and dust in the patient patience of wood. I packed my bag with hands that shook and told myself I'd stepped into a place that remembered more than it should. Outside, the cold felt earned. I sat in my truck until my breathing slowed. When Bill returned, he took one look at me and nodded. "You felt it," he said. "Beams come from mills. They don't come from mine shafts. They go into them." I told myself that all the way back to the station, trying to outrun the pulse that had synchronized with me. I checked codes, regulations. Nothing mentioned Section 7. In the cabinet behind payroll, I found a folder labeled S7. One document. October 18th, 1983. Incident report. Structural anomaly in Shaft 6, Level 3. Support beam exhibiting non-standard behavior. When struck beam responds with audible human speech. Crew extracted. Section 7 activated. Chamber sealed. Beam removed for surface containment and observation. I read it 3 times. My hands went numb. I went back to the beam with my hammer. I told myself I'd tap it and hear hollow wood and laugh at my imagination. The pulse was faster now. I tapped lightly. The sound was wrong soft, wet. I tapped again. "Careful where you strike," the beam whispered. The hammer fell. The echo lingered too long, stretching the room thin. The beam breathed, expanded, contracted. My heart raced to keep up. I backed away and ran into air that felt like permission. Bill listened when I told him. He smoked with shaking hands and told me about Shaft 6. Cold spots. Tools that failed. A beam that changed, not rotted. Changed. "They brought it up," he said. "Installed it to watch it." 3 days later, the mine closed. NDA's severance. Silence. "What is it?" I asked. He shrugged. "The mountain adapting. Learning to live in the spaces we carve. Beams are everywhere we truced him. Perfect camouflage." "Burn it," he said. "High heat. Don't study it." I didn't listen. Curiosity's just fear with better posture. I returned with sensors. Thermal imaging read 98.6 degrees. Moisture content matched human tissue. Seismic sensors traced a rhythm like a heart. Flesh-wearing wood. The chalkboard had changed. The erased name was back. Written fresh. My name. Below it. Section 7 requires replacement. 1 beam removed. 1 beam installed. Installation scheduled. The beam had grown. 1 inch. Maybe 2. In the grain, a face pressed outward. Mine. I ran. Something behind me cracked, testing containment. Bill showed me photos. 3 engineers. Missing. Faces preserved in the grain. Section 7 isn't a code, he said. It's a requirement. I ran for 3 months. Changed my name. Cities without mountains. But wood followed me. Grain patterns watching. Whispers when wind moved through trees. Splinters under my nails that didn't bleed and grew back faster each time. My chest tight with a pulse that wasn't mine. I dream of the station, the beam massive now, splitting roof and walls. In the dream, the clock on the wall hesitates at 47 seconds. Always I stand beside the beam and feel my heart lag. 47 seconds is how long it takes a heart to stop after the last breath. I know this because the beam taught me. In the dream, the wood opens. A vertical mouth. Inside, a chamber the size of me. Waiting. The beam speaks with my voice. Installation complete. Load rating indefinite. I wait counting beats, feeling each one arrive late, as if something else is keeping time now. I don't touch wood anymore. I don't lean on door frames. I type this with gloves on, watching my fingers thicken, harden, learn new shapes. If you're reading this and the county calls you about a small building at the edge of the Thornton mine, refuse. Don't measure the beam. Don't let it match you. Section 7 is patient. It measures first, then it replaces. 1 beam removed. 1 installed. The mountain keeps its balance. I'll be here in the shadows next week. But will you return, knowing what waits in the dark? My grandfather's pocket watch stopped at 6:47 a.m. on the morning he died. Heart attack, sudden and complete. On his front porch with his coffee still steaming in the mug beside him. It was 1998. I was 14. I inherited the watch because I was the only grandchild who listened when he talked about the Morrison mine, the way the earth breathed down there. The way sound traveled wrong. The way time learned bad habits underground. The watch was a retirement gift from the company. Brass casing, Roman numerals, a hairline crack in the crystal that caught the light like a scar. On the back, an inscription, Faithful Service, 1956. A 1992, it kept perfect time for 6 years after his death. Then, one quiet morning, it stopped at 6:47 a.m. Same minute. Same stillness. I had it repaired. The watchmaker frowned, shrugged, said nothing was wrong. 3 days later it stopped again. 6:47 a.m. I put it in a drawer and learned how to forget small, sharp facts that didn't fit anywhere comfortable. 26 years later, I found it again while cleaning my parents' attic. After my mother moved into assisted living, the box smelled like dust and old paper. Inside were my grandfather's helmet, his lamp, a faded photograph of him and his crew standing at the mine entrance. Something I'd never seen before. A brass whistle on a chain. Small. Cylindrical. Worn smooth where fingers had worried it. Engraved along the side. Morrison mine shift whistle. Ye blew into Italian or nothing. Blocked. Maybe. I pocketed the whistle and the watch. Took them home, set them on my dresser beside my keys. Life continued the way it does when it thinks it's safe. 3 weeks later, He woke at 6:47 a.m. to the sound of a whistle. Sharp, piercing. 3 short blasts. The emergency pattern my grandfather had described, the signal that meant surface immediately. I sat up, heart punching my ribs, listening for traffic, for neighbors, for any explanation that would put the sound outside my apartment. The window was closed. The street was empty. The whistle blew again. 3 blasts. It was coming from my dresser. The whistle was vibrating in place, warm as if breath was passing through it from a mouth I couldn't see. I picked it up. The sound stopped. In the morning light, the bore was clear and etched inside the mouthpiece, so faint it hid until I angled it just right, were words I hadn't noticed before. 47 men descended, 46 surfaced, count verified. I checked the photograph, counted faces. 47. The retirement records, I remembered those listed 46 names. Obsession came easily after that. I dug through county records, union archives, brittle newspaper. The Morrison Mines public history was a neat row of tragedies and closures. But in a 1991 report, my hands began to shake. Incident investigation underground crew reports recurring whistle signals from unmapped section of level 5. Signals follow standard shift change pattern, 3 short blasts but occur at inconsistent times. No personnel authorized in that section. Source undetermined. Recommends Section B. Sealed pending acoustic investigation. The investigation never finished. The section was sealed. The mine closed years later. My grandfather retired 3 months after the incident. In the attic box, I found his journal's daily logs kept with the stubborn neatness of a man who trusted ink more than memory. The final entry read like a confession. He wrote about the whistleblowing from level 5. About counting the crew. Counting them twice. Always 46. And yet he remembered 47. He wrote a name. A face. A laugh. He wrote that the records insisted otherwise. He wrote that he couldn't work in a place where numbers lied and memory was punished for noticing. I needed to see level 5. Needed to stand where the whistle learned its voice. Urban exploration forums said the entrance was still navigable if you knew where to look. I drove to Kentucky in February, found the site choked with vines and rust. Warning signs peeled back like old scabs. The welded barrier had been cut away. I entered with a headlamp, water, a backup light and the whistle on its chain around my neck. I wanted to know if it would sound again, if it would lead me to what had learned to count better than people. Then, the silence learned my name. The mine was a corpse. Cold, still. Tunnels filled with standing water and fallen timber. I descended carefully, reading the shaft markers like a rosary. Level 1, Level 2, Level 3. Each deeper, heavier, as if gravity practiced down there. Level 5 was marked by a faded sign. Authorized personnel only, Section C sealed. Rusted rails led to a concrete wall, poured floor to ceiling, painted in red. No entry acoustic hazard. The whistle began to buzz against my chest, matching my pulse. Then it blew. 3 short blasts. The sound ran ahead of me, bounced back, multiplied. The mine answered itself. A crack split the concrete. Narrow. Fresh dust at its base, just wide enough. I squeezed through sideways, pack-scraping lamp illuminating a passage older than the rest, hand-hewn supports. The air felt different circulating, almost clean. The whistle went silent. Warm. Heavy. 200 yards in, I found the chamber. Circular. 50 feet across. 7 passages radiating outward. In the center, arranged with care, were lunch pails, dozens of vintage metal boxers with names stamped on the lids, rusted but intact, placed as if their owners had stepped away for a moment. I counted 47. I matched names 2 faces in the photograph. Everyone accounted for, including a name that didn't exist anywhere else. Samuel. Arlan. I opened his lunch pail. Inside preserved were a sandwich in wax paper, an apple, and a folded note. My grandfather's handwriting. He wrote that he tried to remember, tried to keep a man in the records, that the mine erased him day by day until only a photo and a whistle confirmed he'd been real. He wrote that he was leaving. The whistle blew again, not at my chest. Bind me. A man stood at one of the passages, headlamp hallowing him, work clothes. A lunch pail in hand, he stepped forward and smiled with the tired kindness of someone who'd waited a long time. He said his name. As Saeed 47 descended. 46 surfaced. He said the mine kept better records than the company. He said when he didn't come up, the mine corrected the count. Time cards gone. Rosters changed. By the end of the week, he'd never existed except where the mine couldn't reach easily. A photograph. Whistle. An old man's stubborn memory. He gestured to the circle. He said this was where they stopped, that the mine folded space and closed exits, and the surface forgot they'd entered. No bodies. No compensation. Subtraction. He said the whistle was how they signaled across the gap. 3 blasts. Emergency. Count your crew. He said nobody counted anymore. He said the mine optimized the process. He said I was the first to enter the chamber in 34 years. I noticed then that he cast no shadow. I ran. Not from him. From the certainty that I'd been noticed by something that corrected discrepancies, I squeezed through the crack, climbed towards surface, lungs burning. Daylight felt too bright. My phone had no signal, but the date was right. Time hadn't stolen anything obvious. Not yet. At the county office, I demanded rosters. 46 names. I showed the photograph. The clerk counted 46 faces. I counted 47. We pointed together. She pointed through the space where Samuel's face lived for me and didn't for her. I watched reality choose a side. Back home, the journals began to change. Not the ink, the words. Names thinning into gaps, specifics smoothing into vagueness. I watched a sentence lose its teeth between readings. The mine was patient. It edited backward. The whistle blows every morning now. 6:47 a.m. 3 short blasts. I'm the only one who hears it. To others, it's a corroded trinket. To me, it's a distress beacon. I stopped showing the photograph when I saw the face begin to fade. Another month, maybe 2, and it will be gone. And after that, my memory will follow. The mine removes not just people, but the space they occupied, the gap. The question. I've started checking my own records. They're intact. For now. But last week, I forgot my middle name. Yesterday, a coworker asked if we'd met. My name was on the roster. He looked at it and still asked who I was. The mind knows I entered level 5. It knows I counted, and now it's correcting. I've hidden this account in redundancies, hoping numbers will protect me. If you're reading this and you find a whistle that blows at 6:47 a.m., don't follow it. Don't verify the count. Numbers are always official because the mind makes them so. And if you insist on counting anyway, understand you've become a discrepancy. 3 short blasts. Emergency. Subtraction in progress. I'll be here in the shadows next week, but will you return, knowing what waits in the dark? I teach undergraduate geology at a state university, which means my days are split between fluorescent-lit classrooms and places. The Earth never intended to be polite. I spend hours convincing 18-year-olds that stone remembers pressure, that layers tell stories, that depth is not just distance, but history compressed into darkness. Most of them nod while scrolling. A few listen. Fewer still understand. I understood, or I thought I did. Part of my curriculum involves abandoned mine surveys, surface-level excursions designed to teach spatial reasoning and stratigraphy without flirting with danger. The Wicklow mine in southwest Virginia was ideal, closed in 2001. Structurally stable, thoroughly documented. A ranger station monitored access and maintained safety records. I'd taken student groups there 4 times before. Always level 1. Only 200 feet down. Controlled routes. Predictable returns. In April 2025, during a sabbatical semester, I led an advanced group graduate students working on thesis research. We had permission to go deeper. Level 3. 600 feet. Still within safety margins. Still within the map's certainty. I remember briefing them at the entrance, my voice echoing slightly even before we stepped inside. Stay together. Follow marked paths. Don't touch supports. And watch the depth markers. The markers were metal placards, bolted into the walls at regular intervals, stamped with depth measurements and installation dates. Old-school mine safety infrastructure, every 100 feet, a reminder of where you were relative to the surface. Reliable. Objective. That mattered to me. In geology, measurement is truth. We descended in single file. Headlamps swept across timber braces and coal-stained stone. The air cooled fast, the smell shifting from damp earth to something older, metallic, faintly bitter. We reached level 3 at 10:15 a.m. and gathered at a junction where 6 passages converged. I was explaining coal seam displacement when Narration called me over. "Professor?" she said, holding her light steady on a placard. "This doesn't match." The marker read, Level 3 to 800 feet, installed 1987. I frowned. Level 3 was 600 feet. I knew that as well as my own office number. I checked the map from the ranger station. 600. I leaned closer, tracing the stamped numbers with my glove. No damage. No corrosion. 800 feet, and beneath it, in smaller text, measurement accurate as of installation. Depth subject to change. I didn't like that phrasing. Depth doesn't change. Mountains rise and erode over millennia, not decades. Still, I took a photo and told myself it was a documentation error. We continued. 20 minutes later, James Park flagged me down. Another marker, 30 feet from the first. Level 3 to 1,000 feet installed. 1987, impossible. The floor wasn't sloped. I had them verify grade with surveying tools. Less than 2 degrees, flat enough that the markers should agree. De evidente. We found more, 7 in total. Each one different. 650 feet, 780, 890, 1,200. No pattern, no logic. Every single one carried the same line. Depth subject to change. That was when I decided to abort the survey. Confusion underground kills people. I gathered the students, did a head count. 12. Everyone accounted for. We turned back toward the ascent tunnel. Mara stopped. Professor. Look. The first marku, the one I'd photographed now, read 1,100 feet. I knew what I had seen. I checked my camera with shaking hands. The photo showed 1,100 feet too, not 800. As if it had always been that way. That was the moment the silence learned my name. We moved faster. Not running, but close. The ascent tunnel sloped upward. Gravity unmistakable. Muscles burning in the familiar way that told your body you were climbing. 15 minutes later, we reached what should have been level 2. The marker said, Level 4 to 1,400 feet. Level 4 did not exist. I checked the map again. 3 levels. Max depth. 600 feet. The paper felt thin, unreliable, like it might rewrite itself if I looked away. James crouched by the marker, his voice tight. This placard style wasn't used in the 80s, he said. It's newer. 90s, at least. It was right, and the metal looked fresh. Too clean. The tunnel behind us wasn't right either. The timber supports were darker, more ornamental. Rails we'd passed were rusted away, as if decades had slid over them while we weren't looking. We chose a different tunnel, a faded arrow painted on the wall. Surface. We followed it for what felt like hours. Markers climbed into absurdity. 2,000 feet, 3,500, numbers that belonged to oil shafts and deep earth drills, not Appalachian coal mines. No one spoke. Fear had turned inward, coiling, rewriting thoughts before they reached our mouths. We reached a circular chamber where 7 tunnels met. In the center stood a single marker on a pole, like a signpost. It was spinning slowly. No wind, no mechanism. As it turned, the numbers changed. 500, 1,200, 6,000, 200. A voice echoed through the chamber. 800 feet, 1,400. 2,200. My voice. It came from one of the tunnels. I walked toward it, because standing still felt worse. The tunnel opened into a room, and I stopped so abruptly that Mara collided with me. The room was filled with depth markers. Hundreds. Walls. Ceiling. Floor. Every surface, all rotating slowly, numbers cycling in hypnotic rhythms. In the center sat a desk, and behind it sat me. Older. 60, maybe more. My face worn thin, a mine inspector's vest over my shoulders. He looked up and smiled. "You're early," he said. "The readings aren't calibrated yet for your group." He gestured at the markers. "The mine measures itself through us. Every person who enters adds their perception of depth, not physical distance experience. The markers record that. They're not measuring how far from the surface you are. They're measuring how far from baseline reality you've descended." He opened a ledger. Names. Numbers. My name at the top. Baseline. 600 feet. Below it, my students. Each one adding depth just by being there. "When you leave," he said, "the mind keeps the measurements. When you return, you start deeper. After enough people, after enough measurements." He smiled again. Bottomless. I didn't let him finish. I grabbed my students and ran. The tunnels twisted. Markers flashed negative numbers as if we were rising above the surface while still surrounded by stone. The walls softened. Impressions of hands and faces pressed into them like memory caught mid-breath. We burst into the level 3 junction. The marker read, "Level 3 minus 600 feet. Measurement final." Light spilled from the ascent tunnel. We climbed. We emerged into afternoon sun at 2:37 p.m. 12 students. Everyone out. The ranger's records showed nothing wrong. The photos corrected themselves. The mine was closed to us, but officially, it had never changed. My students vanished from the program one by one. Mara emailed once. She said she saw markers everywhere now. Buildings, trees, places deeper than others. I still teach. I don't go underground. Last week, I found a marker in my office. Depth. 800 feet. Subject to change. You woke at 3:47 a.m. last night, without knowing why. Into mirror behind me. Reflected but not present. A marker floated. It cycled through my life. 0 feet birth. 600 feet. Wicklow Mine. 2,000 feet current. Final depth. Infinite. I'm writing this as documentation. Measurements don't just record reality. They create it. And once you've been measured, you never stop descending. I'll be here in the shadows next day, but will you return, knowing what waits in the dark? The first thing I noticed wasn't the screaming or the sirens or the way the mountain held its breath. It was my watch. I'd bought it years ago because the second hand moved cleanly. No stutter, no S, except that afternoon, standing outside the Buchanan mine. It paused just a fractionate, 47 seconds. Every minute. A tiny hitch you'd miss if you weren't trained to watch time the way I am. Counting breaths, counting pulses, counting how long a brain can survive without oxygen. I remember thinking the battery was dying. I remember thinking anything except what the mountain was already counting. I'm a paramedic. I'm trained for chaos, for blood and noise and the clean arithmetic of survival. When the coal came in partial collapse. Level 2. Easton XCI took my place with the surface medical team and did what I always do. prepared for the predictable crush injuries, burns, hypoxia. Men pulled from stone like broken tools. The report said 7 traps. The word stable was used, which in mining means nothing is stable, just patient. We waited. Hours stretched the way they always do in emergencies, elastic and cruel. The mountain loomed above us, dark with winter, quiet in a way that felt intentional. At 4:22 p.m., the first miner walked out of the level 1 entrance. Walked. No stretcher. No rescue harness. Thomas Brainan, 34. Coal dust, like a second skin. A shallow cut on his cheek. Vitals perfect. He looked past me, not at me, as if I were something temporary. When I asked about the others, he smiled barely and said they were coming. Said they'd found the exit. Said it was on level 7. There is no level 7. The mine has 4 levels. Documented, surveyed, argued over by engineers and regulators who love numbers more than people. I chalked it up to shock and kept moving. The second miner surfaced 30 minutes later. Marcus Webb. Same calm, same eyes, same answer. Level 7. By the 4th, then the 5th, the words stopped sounding like coincidence and started sounding rehearsed, like a line everyone had been taught and would not deviate from. All 7 emerged uninjured. All 7 walked. All 7 spoke in the same careful cadence, like men reading from something just out of sight. After transport, Sarah Ortiz pulled me aside. She'd been doing this longer than I'd been alive, her face carved by collapses and recoveries that never made the news. We didn't extract them, she said. We found their gear. Lunch pails, still warm, helmets stacked. No bodies. And then they walked out. All at once, she showed me the footage. The collapse site. Impassable. Then the entrance. 7 silhouettes stepping into light. No escort. No explanation. My watch hit 47 seconds and paused. I tracked Brennan down 2 days later. His house smelled like coffee and disinfectant. A domestic attempt at normalcy that failed the way all attempts fail when something has learned your name. He told me about the opening, about descending the ward light that shouldn't exist underground, about passing markers for levels no map acknowledged, about a chamber that felt like a waiting room for men who never stopped working. He said level 7 wasn't depth. It was duration. Time measured in hours underground. Thresholds. Final shifts. He said the mountain kept an accounting. When he finished, he looked at me like someone waiting for a verdict. I didn't give him one. I drove home, hands shaking, watch ticking wrong, and tried to sleep. That night, I dreamed of a clock with no face. Only a second hand that stopped at 47 and waited. I interviewed the rest. Different kitchens. Same words. Same old man with a clipboard who knew their names. Same choice. Stay and work or leave owing. Every sentence sharpened something inside me, a sense that reality was thinning where it should have been thick. You'd think I'd stop. You'd think fear would send me running. But fear roots you like old trees. It convinces you the danger is knowledge withheld, not knowledge gained. They all describe the work the same way, digging tunnels that led nowhere, moving stone from one pile to another and back again. Labor without production, effort without outcome, a balance sheet written in muscle and time, When they left, they carried the dead with them. Sleepwalking, pulling west, door alarms screaming. Miles covered without memory. Marcus calculated it like a man clinging to numbers. At his rate, 2 weeks, 10 lists. I filed reports. I used the right language. PTSD. Shared experience. I watched institutions do what they do best. Close ranks. Close cases. Resume operations. The mine reopened. Men went down. Men came up. The mountain learned patience. I went back underground with Sarah. Level 2. Eastern section. Reinforced. Clean. Stone like any other stone. I pressed my palm to it and felt a pulse. Faint. Steady. 72 beats per minute. My watch paused at 47 seconds. Sarah rationalized. I watched her do it because I've done it 1,000 times with patients who need something to hold on to. When we left, the silence followed us, close enough to feel warm. Records came next. Names, dates, disappearances smoothed into paperwork. 347 men who never surfaced. I counted them twice. My watch hesitated twice every minute. At night, I woke in my yard, facing west. Then the driveway. Then the county line. I started sleeping with my keys locked away. I woke with dirt on my shoes. Anyway, Thomas went first. Then Marcus's. Cars at the entrance. Boot prints to the wall. Endings without bodies. The words presumed and unmapped did the work of erasure. I watched patterns complete themselves. I watched time 47 seconds became loud. It was how long my patience sometimes lingered after the last breath, heart stuttering toward stillness. It was how long the mountain waited before counting the next minute. Sarah called me once more. She told me attention counted, that writing added to totals, that rescue added to hers. She said she was driving. I listened to the line go dead and felt the pull tighten. I'm finishing this because I know what comes next. I know I'll wake at the entrance. I know the wall will open for me because my count is incomplete. I know the old man will nod, and when my watch pauses at 47 seconds for the last time, I'll understand the kindness of a place where numbers finally stop increasing. And as this story fades into darkness, remember the shadows you see tonight are only the beginning. The horrors of the digital and the unknown are endless, and some whispers refuse to die. If you crave more, don't stop now. There is another chilling journey waiting for you in 9 most disturbing true Appalachian abandoned mine horror stories, and step even deeper into the places where secrets have been buried for generations, where the air itself seems to hold its breath, and every echo might not belong to the living. Before you disappear into that abyss, make sure you subscribe to Scary Dark Narrations. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that will haunt your mind long after the screen goes dark. Your next nightmare is only a click away, and trust me, you will want to be there when it begins to whisper your name. Keep your lights low, your devices close, and your senses alert. Because in the world of true horror, some doors opened only once, and what waits inside does not forgive curiosity. If you dare